On this episode, we talk with Melissa Hubbard, CEO of the well-known equestrian brand Kerrits. Melissa shares her experiences of working in corporate America, a startup, what her current role of CEO entails, and so much more. Listen in.
My mom sent me to summer camp when I was 7. So she and my dad had separated, and she was working as a waitress. She was a teacher during the school year and waitress during the summer to kind of help ends meet. And so she needed something for me to do during the summer. So I was 7 and she sent me to a riding camp, and I would ride all day and she would pick me up and I would go to the restaurant and sleep in a booth after camp until she finished her shift. And so that's kind of how it all started. Summer camp, 7 years old. So 43 years ago.
Wow. So did you just have that initial, I love the horses, or did you always want to be around horses, or was it something that just grew on you?
I always loved animals, and I grew up around animals, but not necessarily around horses up until that point. So I wasn't athletic ever. So I don't think that I had I wasn't interested in sports necessarily. So she couldn't send me to a sport. I think it was just like intervention. Divine intervention. Girl needs to go ride horses. So yeah, I mean, I was hooked from the very first day of camp. I just could not get enough of horses and still can't. Like I often say that everything that I've done in my life, every decision that I've made since that riding camp has been made to help me have more time with horses and in the barn.
Wow.
So it literally, I was just immediately hooked. Pony girl, still the pony girl.
How many horses do you have now?
I have 2, which is one too many. But yeah, I have 2. I do the hunters and the equitation. And I have both of my boys are warm bloods. I have Willie, and he is an 18-year-old Dutch warm blood, and I have Tucker, who is an 11-year-old Holsteiner. And Willie was supposed to retire about a year ago. He was having repeated soft tissue injuries, and so I'm like, we just it's time, Willie, for you to just go eat grass and be a horse. And so I turned him out, and a year after we turned him out, he started jumping out of his field every day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So my vet said, turn him out for a year and let's just reassess where we are. But in my mind, I needed to go to Willie's retired because we had been through this rehab process so many times with him that I just couldn't emotionally do it another time. So I just needed to just be in a place where Willie is retired. But the vet said, put him out for a year and we'll see where we are. And it was literally a week to the year. I went, he was at my friend's house she boards a few horses. And she called me and she said, Melissa, you got to come get your horse because he's literally jumping out and running around the neighborhood every day. And I went to the barn. I'm like, Willie, did you set a task reminder? Because it's literally been a year this week.
Wow.
So we rehabbed him again. And he was going to start jumping again. And I just didn't have it in me to try to do that again. So I found him a wonderful dressage home. So he's leased to a woman who's local to me here, and she's doing dressage on him. And I actually got to go take a lesson on him on Saturday. I did a dressage lesson on him. It was like, I almost cried. So he's good. He's really good. And Tucker, I leased when Willie got hurt. He was going to be my fill-in horse. And then he just could never leave. He could never leave. So
Willie just needed a year, literally a year to just rest.
Yeah. I mean, every possible treatment that can be done to a sport horse who has had soft tissue injuries, we did. We did PRP, and he just kept having repeated soft tissue injuries. And my vet kept saying, this is not work related. This job that this horse is doing is not hard for him. It was just like this big mystery. And it was so heartbreaking because he is my love and we did everything that we could. I only jumped once a week. I horse showed very little, just enough to get qualified for finals. We were super careful with him. But his soft tissue had other plans. So hopefully with the dressage job, without the concussion of jumping, he'll be able to stay sound enough to do that for a while. He's a very young 18. You would never know.
Wow.
He looks amazing. And so he's very happy. When you know a horse that well that you can just look at them and know they're happy. Like I walked into his barn on Saturday morning and I hadn't seen him since June. And I'm like, he's happy. This horse is
Aw.
really, really happy.
Wow.
So that's all you could ever want.
Yeah.
So he's had a long career and has saved my life more times than I care to admit. So he deserves only the best, and he's in a really good place. So that's always good.
That
Yeah.
is. So
Yeah.
after you did your riding camp and got into the horses, did you continue on in riding camps until you like went to college, or how did you
Yeah.
do through
So
school?
I grew up in Virginia. So lots of horses around. And shared my time between my mom and my dad. And my dad was in southwestern Virginia and my mom was in northern Virginia. So I was able to kind of take lessons regardless of where I was.
That's nice.
Yeah, which is really nice. So I typically spent school years with my mom and summers with my dad. And then in high school, that kind of flipped. But yeah, I just kept taking lessons. And then I got my first pony when I was in, I'm going to say sixth grade, seventh grade, somewhere around there. Her name was Cinder, and she was a little Connemara pony, flea bitten Connemara, and she lived in my backyard. And she would we had apple trees that were in the outside of her field, and she would lay down and like shimmy herself under the fence to get out. We would find her grazing under the apple tree. She was wild, and I was wild. I would just ride bareback all over the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We had a pond. We would gallop through, like just craziness. And I was taking lessons and trying to learn how to ride, but I really was not a very educated rider, I would say. I really, my real horsemanship riding education, I will say, started truly in college. I went to St. Andrews University in Laurinburg, North Carolina, and worked as a work study student in the barn and minored in equestrian studies. And that's really where I learned how to be a more sophisticated and better educated horse person, and learned more about the equitation, which was nice because when you live in the Northeast, which is where I live now, it's all about equitation, even when you're a 50-year-old woman. So I needed that background for sure. So yeah, so I rode all through college, competed in the IHSA and the ANRC a little bit, and did a little bit of showing. We had a show team that did sort of some horse shows in Aiken, down in that area. And then I graduated from college and mom stopped paying the bills. So I had to figure out how to pay for horses on my own. And so I worked a lot of jobs. I worked 3 jobs well into my 30s so that I could afford to have horses in my life. And the only time that I took off was about 4 years, when I was going back to school to get my MBA and getting married, and life just kind of got complicated. And I'm not a person who can be half in. I need to be all in or not. And so those were the only 4 years of my life since I was 7 that I've not ridden.
Wow.
So yeah. Yeah. So when I say it's been a lifelong thing, and it is in my blood, and it is who I am and what I do, it is. I don't know who I would be without horses.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were in the equestrian world for quite a bit before you joined Kerrits.
Yeah. So it's kind of a crazy story. I had done a lot of different jobs out of college. I worked for Dover Saddlery for a little bit in customer service. And it was during that time where I was working like 3 jobs to pay for horses. And I started temping, like working for a temp agency, and they placed me at State Street Bank and Trust, which is a giant financial services institution here in Boston with 1,800 employees all over the world and all kinds of crazy things. Corporate America, not my jam at all. But it was an opportunity to learn a whole lot of things. So I was there for 6 years, and they paid for my MBA, which is really nice.
That's really awesome.
I was also working in human services at the time. So I was taking care of developmentally disabled and adults, and a lot of adults with mental illnesses. So I was doing that kind of nights and weekends and doing the corporate America thing during the week. It was a little bit of a crazy time. So fast forward to 6 years into my life at State Street, and it was 2000. No, what year was it? 2003. It was 2003-ish. and things weren't going so great in financial services. And a consulting company came in and said to State Street, you need to lay off a bunch of people, but this is going to tank your stock. So what we would like to do is for you to offer a package to all of your employees. And it was like the craziest thing. They gave us 6 weeks to decide if we wanted to take the package. And they literally offered this to everybody. And your package was dependent on how long you had been employed. And a bunch of other things, I'm sure, but this is what I remember about it. And I'd been there 6 years and I was bored to death sitting in a cubicle. They just paid for my MBA and I was like, I cannot get out of here fast enough. So what happened is those of us who were capable and probably not the ones that they wanted to lay off went out and found other jobs because they gave us such a long runway to do that. So I had 6 weeks to go find a job. And my package at the time to me felt like really generous. Looking back, I'm like, but at the time I felt like I had this great cushion. And so I had the opportunity to take a little bit of a risk. And SmartPack was a startup at that time. And I applied for a customer service job at SmartPack and interviewed for 2 days. And I was interviewed. There were maybe 5 employees at the time, 6, not many. There were not many employees at the time. So I was interviewed by all the employees and the dogs in the office. Like they would train the dogs. And then if I could get along with the dogs, then I was like, okay, she's good.
Yeah.
Sounds like us.
And at the end of 2 days, it was like, okay, so we don't really know what we're going to do with you. And I'm like, well, I'm applying for this customer service job. I did customer service at Dover. I could do this. I promise you, I have an MBA. I could do this. And they're like, yeah, I don't think that's really where we need you. So they just hired me and I became a buyer.
Oh, wow.
And I had worked in corporate procurement at State Street. So my job was there to negotiate contracts for very boring things like cell phones and office supplies and just, so I did have a buying background, but I didn't have a retail buying background and I didn't have any inventory management background at all. But at that point, SmartPack was only selling supplements and like 5 brushes and some fly spray and 1 Rambo blanket. Like it wasn't what it is today. And so that's what happened. I got hired as a buyer at SmartPack and somehow fast forward 12 years from there. And we had grown this huge business with private label products. And so Kerrits was one of my customers at SmartPack.
Okay.
So I was in charge of merchandising. So all of the brands that we sold on our website and in our catalogs, I managed those relationships along with my team of buyers. And so I knew all the people at Kerrits. So that's kind of, so I've known them. I've been employed by Kerrits now for 3 years, but have known these folks since the early 2000s. So when I left SmartPack, I consulted for a while, worked at Equifit for a little while, my friends, Scott and Tracy Noonan owned Wicked Good Cupcakes. I don't know if you're a Shark Tank fan, but if you are, you maybe have seen their story. So was doing those consulting gigs and Kerrits asked me to help them. And so here I am.
So when you started with SmartPack then, I mean, that's been the lengthy career choice that you've had. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. When you got out of school or when you were going to school in college and you went with, horses in mind, what did you think you would do after school?
I honestly, so I always loved business. I guess, let me back up. I knew that I was not talented enough to be a professional rider. So I knew that that wasn't a path for me because I am an amateur. I'm a solid amateur.
I'm sure you're not, but
that is it. That is the extent of my ability. So I knew that like riding professionally wasn't going to be a thing. I majored in business with a minor in equestrian studies. And at that time, you didn't really think about there being an opportunity for horses in business, right? Like there weren't, the SmartPacks didn't exist. Dover existed, but in a very different way. Tack shops existed, but you didn't really think about the opportunity to run a business in the equestrian space. So I don't think that really ever dawned on me either. So I wasn't really sure. I knew that I wanted to be in business and I knew that I wanted to ride horses. And so I just kind of clawed my way around and tried a bunch of different things until I really found SmartPack. And that was the first time that I was really able to combine business and horses in a meaningful way. Um, so yeah, I did. I mean, y'all, I worked for a septic pumping company. I groomed on the A circuit. I worked in human services for a long time. Like I did a lot, a lot of different things. And I found SmartPack when I was in my early 30s. So it took a while. It took a while to find that. And then once I found SmartPack, I knew that I was home. Like that is when it really felt like, okay, this is a way that I can combine my love of horses with my my business geek, my internal business geek. And it was just beautiful. And it was a wonderful, amazing 12 years there. And I started at SmartPack when there was, like I said, like 5 of us. And so we had to learn everything. Like we had in all aspects of the business, we had to learn everything. And we were, you know, we had a lot of really smart people on that team. And I am incredibly grateful for the time that I had there, because I don't think I would have been as successful without being surrounded by those people who really pushed me to be better than I thought I could be. So it was a great time. And, at the end of those 12 years, I had grown a team of incredibly capable, competent people, and it was time for them to do their thing. And so it was time for me to do something else.
So you really got to get in there and figure out where you could find what worked for you, the best place for you to be, knowing that then coming out of SmartPack with all of that, you probably got to, kind of like we do here, we kind of figure out what spot we're supposed to be in, and who, like I tried sales when I was here. I mean, my parents, owning the company, I mean, that's, they were always like, you need to be in sales. And I truly found that when the girls were young, that was kind of difficult for me, because our sales take so long, and you are constantly having to remember, everybody that you're, and I would forget something and I'd be at home and I'd be frantic, thinking, oh my goodness. But, finding our spots here too is the same way. And being able to take what you have now going into Kerrits, what were you able to say, this is what I can do for you?
Yeah. So, Kerrits was founded. I'll just talk about the story of Kerrits a little bit, and it kind of helps understand how I got there and what my what my role is. So Kerrits was founded in 1986, I think, kind of around the same time that you guys started your business, by a woman named Carrie. Carrie Kent, and Carrie was a windsurfer living in Hood River, Oregon, and she was frustrated with swimsuits. So she was an athletic woman trying to, be a windsurfer on the Columbia River, and swimsuits didn't fit her. And so she went out and bought some fabric and started custom making swimsuits literally out of the trunk of her car. And that is how Carrot started. Carrot started as a swimsuit company.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not something you would think.
No, right? And Carrie also rode horses. So several years into life at Kerrits, she had a retail store in Hood River and was selling bathing suits. And this part of the story, I'm a little bit unclear of how this connection happened, but she got connected with a CEO of an equestrian company who asked her to design tights, riding tights.
Okay.
For them. And so that's kind of how the horse part started. And that soon became way more significant than the bathing suits. And so the bathing suits went away, and Kerrits, as you know, it was born. So Carrie, crazy entrepreneurial, high creativity, amazing woman, grew the business to a point where she felt like she needed some help to get it to its next level. And so she started looking for some partners to help her do that. And she really wanted to focus on the creative side of the business and not so much the day-to-day management of the business. So I had known her from my time at SmartPack, and she had watched that business grow under my leadership, as well as the leadership of others. And I think she recognized that there was a possibility that I could help her get Kerrits to the next level while she was able to focus more on the creative stuff that she really enjoyed. So she and I talked a lot when I was at SmartPack, and then also after I left SmartPack. And she called me when I was working for Equifit and also for Wicked Good. And she said, would you be interested in coming to help us do this business? And I said, I have 2 jobs. I have 2 jobs already. I don't know if I can do 3. And she just wouldn't stop calling. She just wouldn't stop asking me. So, I loved Equifit and loved Wicked Good and was very happy with where I was there. So I said, okay, I will consult with you guys for 6 months, and then we'll see if we like each other as much as we think we do. And if this is the right fit, then we can go from there. So obviously that was 3 years ago, and I'm still here. So, it's all good. So that's really sort of how Kerrits happened. Carrie needed somebody to help her run the business.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And it's all about horses. Like everything that's happened in my life, every opportunity, the people that are the most important people in my life are all people that have been associated in some way with horses. So it's, I give all the credit. I give all the credit to horses.
So what do you do at Kerrits? What's your title and how do you help them?
Yeah, so my title is CEO, and Kerrits is still, 30, 35 people, so relatively small team. And really my job is to support the team so that they can get their jobs done. Really is how I describe what I do. I obviously, it's small team, I do a lot of different things. But the main thing I would say is to make sure that the team understands the vision and the strategy and the goals, and that they have the path to get there. And that if there are roadblocks or things that are difficult, that I can help them get through that so that we can all keep driving the bus in the same direction. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're leading a team of people, and you have led a team of people before. What qualities do you think that you have that, have really driven your teams to success?
That's such a hard question. That's such a hard question. So I don't know that I have a fantastic answer for you. What I can tell you is that I truly believe that leadership ability, leadership skills is not something that you can teach somebody. They have it or they don't. And for whatever reason, I am blessed to have some of that skill set and some of those abilities. I think from the very beginning of my life as a manager, I was always tried to be respectful of my team, respectful in a way, like I don't like people to call me their boss. I don't like people to call me their manager. Like I'm your teammate. I would never ask someone to do something that I would not be myself willing to do. I stand in the trenches with my team, and I unpack boxes with them at the trade show, and I go unload boxes in the warehouse when I need to. And so I think sort of building that camaraderie and being a part of the team and not just the leader of the team is a big component of that. I think a lot of managers think they just need to tell people what to do. And it doesn't work. That doesn't work. Not long term anyway. You may get some short term results, but I think long term, if you're trying to lead a team and rally the troops, so to speak, to get everybody on the same page, that doesn't work. So that's my goal, is really just to be a team player and provide direction and clarity so that everybody can understand what the goals are and what the end game is, so to speak. That is very difficult. That is very difficult. At SmartPack, we did a lot of have you ever heard of a 360 review?
No.
So a 360 review is when you have a lot of different people in the company do like a performance evaluation on
Mhm.
you. So not your direct reports, your peers, like people in other departments that you may not necessarily have influence over. And it was an incredibly oh gosh, I got so anxious when we did these reviews because you get a lot, it's anonymous. You don't know who the feedback is coming
Yeah.
from. But I will say, growing my career at that time, that kind of feedback was incredibly valuable to me,
Mhm.
as a leader, because it taught me a lot of things. But one of the main things it taught me was that I thought I was a very good communicator, and the people around me did not agree with that.
Hmm.
And so I was like, all right, you're going to need to get better at this.
Mhm.
And it wasn't necessarily because I wasn't providing the information, it was that I wasn't providing it in a way that each of those individual people could absorb it and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to really sort of dial in and tune into what different styles of communication different members of my team needed in order for it to be effective for them. So that was super insightful. And then one of the other things that I learned is that people needed more from me. And it was at a time when I thought I was giving 150% of
Hmm.
myself, and I was, but I was giving 150% of myself to a lot of different people. And so each of those individual people were not feeling it.
Wow.
So um, I had to figure out how to be better at that too. So, sort of to circle back to your question, I think, a lot of it is just it's in your DNA.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, and then a lot of it is being given the opportunity to have learning experiences like a 360 review. Um, and the result of that review wasn't a different skill set that I needed. Like I had the skill set, it was
Mhm.
just learning how to fine tune the tools that I had so that they were more effective. Um, so
Were there any tools that you were able to use to help you with that, or did you just try to focus on the people themselves, or how did you figure that out?
Because changing your communication style is very hard.
Yeah.
So, like,
is, and I
Gretchen's
don't know
laughing.
that yeah, well, and I didn't, I mean, you can't change who you are, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I didn't necessarily change my communication style. I just used it. I over communicated, I would say. So my preferred mode of communication is email because it gives me time to think and
Mhm.
process, and
Okay.
like it's all clear in my head in an email, it's
Mm-hmm.
all clear. But sometimes people want to hear you speak the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what I would do is say for a team meeting, I would email out an agenda, and I would put some talking points into that email for each agenda item. And then we would go into the meeting, and then I would then talk them through all of those things in person. And so for the people who wanted to read, they had it in the email. And for the
Okay.
people who really just wanted to listen, they could have the discussion during the staff meeting. But the two of those things together really worked great because, we're all bombarded by a million different things these days, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to see something 5, 6, 7, 10
Yes.
times before you really digest it. So it ended up being a great way for people to like see it twice and
Yeah.
have more of an opportunity to absorb
Mhm.
and move forward. But yeah, like the worst thing ever is when you feel like you have communicated really well and your whole team is like, I have no idea
Hmm.
what you are saying and what you are talking
Mm-hmm.
about. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
thought I had done such a good job at this. That's kind of extreme. It wasn't really that extreme, but
But it probably felt like it.
Mm-hmm.
it did feel like it. And it did. And for me, like I'm inherently a kind person and I want to take care of my team and take care of my people. And I
Mm-hmm.
really felt like I was taking very good care of them.
Mhm.
And some of them didn't feel like I was.
Hmm.
And so, from that perspective, it was really difficult for me. Um, and it was anonymous, but I could kind of tell by the comments
Mhm.
some of who it was. And so it did allow me to have conversations with those people. And, having difficult conversations is a thing that, we talk about a lot as leaders and managers, right? Like, how do you have a conversation, and how do you coach your junior team members into how to have a difficult conversation? And I just had to be like, come in a conference room with me. We need to have a conversation. And I just would sit down at the table with him and be like, listen, this is not going to be fun. And this is going to be terribly awkward. But here's how I think you're feeling. And here's what my intention was. And I like to say there's my perception, there's the other person's perception, and then there's like the reality is somewhere in the middle of that. So it's always challenging.
So then the other point that you made too was that you thought you were giving 150%. People weren't feeling that same way. You could take that to any aspect of your life, as a mom, as as even horse riders, that you're giving all of this and then you have no time left to even get on the horse because you're so tired, type of a thing. How did you work through that to make that better for everybody and yourself?
So I had to get to a place where I was comfortable with the fact that I couldn't do it all myself. And delegating things was very difficult for me because I really loved all of the components of my job. And that sounds so hokey, right? Because there's nobody loves everything about their job, but I really others maybe than pricing supplements. Part of what I did at SmartPack, I really loved. And so I started delegating some of that stuff when I kind of got to a place where I was comfortable with the fact that I couldn't do it all. And the feedback that I got was, you don't care anymore because you're not coming to these meetings and you're not involved. And my intention was, I can't do it all, and I need to grow this team, and I need to give them responsibilities and let them do it rather than me doing it. And that's what I was trying to do, give them opportunities and help them grow. And their perception was I didn't care anymore. So I just had to be careful from then on. I was like, okay, so you know what? I need to better explain why I'm handing over some of these responsibilities and why I'm not going to these meetings, and people then will understand. I had oftentimes life was really crazy and busy, and I had staff meetings with my team that we talked about earlier, and sometimes I would reschedule them, and that really upset people because it felt like they weren't important and I wasn't making time for them. So I had to make sure that I didn't reschedule that meeting ever again. Like, never again did we reschedule that meeting. Other things moved, but for my team, they were priority, and and good on them for raising their hand and saying we need to be your priority. So it was a lot about letting go and making sure that people understood why I was letting go of certain things. And in my personal life, and for my child, God love my child. He's 15 now. And when he was born, I was like, he's got 2 legs, not 4. What do I do with this? Seriously, how do I keep this creature alive?
Yeah.
And I went back to work when he was 10 weeks old, and I was traveling a lot when he was an infant.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of help at home, and thankfully he doesn't remember that I wasn't there a lot, because it would make me sad if he felt like I wasn't there for him. But I did have to get to a place where I said no. For him. Like, I had to be his mom. And one of the reasons ultimately that I left SmartPack was because of him, because he needed more of my time and attention. And I had this team that was fully capable of doing what they needed to do, and I needed to craft my life in such a way that I could be more available for Logan. So that is one of the reasons. So you can't do it all. And all these, like, lean in these lean in conversations and be superwoman, it's not sustainable. And you have to be able to take care of yourself, and leaning in means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Right.
And I certainly have had a very big and successful career, and I don't feel like I've missed out on anything at all. And I do feel like taking care of myself has been the thing that has helped to make it even more successful. You have to take time. You have to take time to take care of yourself. You have to take time to be with your family. And for those of us who use horses as therapy,
Mm-hmm.
we have to take time. I ride 5 days a week.
Wow. Good for
I ride
you.
5 days a week. My horse is 10 minutes from my house. And so I make sure that I can get there for that physical exercise and
Mm-hmm.
also for the mental
Yeah.
exercise. Some of my best product development ideas have happened when I was riding my horse.
Hmm.
You know, like you're in a saddle and you're like,
Yeah.
these pants are terrible. Like, what can we do to make this better? Um, so that time is very valuable, and um, I expect my team to take good care of themselves too, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of force them to. If they don't take time. I'm a big believer in flex schedules. I'm a big believer in allowing people to do what they need to do to manage their lives, because I think that makes them way more productive when they are sitting
Mm-hmm.
at their desks.
I
So
agree on that one.
So what does that actually look like for your team that you implement? Because that's a very like
That's a big
debatable
thing right now. Where
like topic.
some of the my dad and my grandfather, I mean, they both owned businesses, and it was
yep.
that is not in the cards to have that flex time, and we're coming up upon a place where I feel like that's more important now than what it was before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
So how
sure.
do you?
Yeah, so it is an evolution, right? And you have to have the right people in place. So Smart Pack was very much, you are at your desk from 8:30 to 5:30 every single day. And it is very important that you are in these buildings, and it is very important that you were in the building during those hours. By the time I left, we had progressed to a
Mm-hmm.
point where, and I really advocated for this very strongly, because I had a team of people who wanted to ride their horse, and we're in New England and it's dark and it's cold, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't go ride at 6 o'clock at night in February. You just can't.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed to ride to do their jobs. So we would allow people to flex their schedules, so they could shift to work, instead of 8:30 to 5:30, maybe they did 11 to 7, or maybe they did 10 to 6, or maybe they worked long days Monday through Thursday and took Fridays off. Like, we made it work
Mm-hmm.
for each individual person. I'm not entirely sure what happened after I left, and whether or not that continued, but and it really, at Kerrits, it really depends on the position, right? Like, a
Mm-hmm.
customer service person who's taking care of our customers during business hours kind of needs to be available during those business
Right.
hours. People who are in the warehouse working, picking orders, kind of need to be available
Right.
during the hours which we need to pick and ship orders. But beyond that, there really can be a lot of flexibility in when people and where people do their jobs. COVID taught us that we can just be kind of wherever we need to be to do our jobs. So I really leave it up to the managers of each of their teams to decide what is appropriate for them. The marketing team, marketing is 24/7 now, like,
Yeah.
especially our folks who deal with social media, and even our folks who don't deal with social media, it's 24/7. So if they want to go take a riding lesson on a Tuesday morning, then they go take a riding lesson on a Tuesday morning. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
gotta have time to do that in their lives. So it's really, and that's a big challenge too, because for those people whose jobs do require that they sit at a desk during specific hours of the week, it's hard, I think, to make it all feel fair and equitable when some people can have that flexibility and some people can't. So again, it really is back to communication about why,
Hmm.
you know, why, and why it works for some departments and some people, and why it may not
Right.
work for others. And, I always say, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Don't let something like fester and aggravate you to the point that it becomes an explosion. And I really try to encourage people to speak up if they see something that, they don't understand, or they don't understand why that opportunity isn't available to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult to get people comfortable enough to do that. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And I say it a lot, like, you're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
You're not going to hurt my feelings, and I can't solve a problem that I don't know exists.
Right.
So, the communication has to be a two-way street, but it's a challenge, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really a challenge now that we're all sitting, like, I live in Massachusetts. Kerrits is headquartered in Washington State. I could not possibly be farther away from my team on a daily
Really?
basis. Yes. Yes.
Wow. So
So,
you,
I guess, how do you make sure that your communication is like on par?
No, we've been talking so much about communication. So this only works because there is a woman in the office named Michelle McAlpine who has been a Carrots employee since day one. And the team in the home office at Carrots has been there for a very long time, and they, with Michelle's help, can manage the day-to-day kinds of things without me physically having to be in the building with them.
Okay.
So I am there, depending on like trade show schedules and what's going on. I'm usually there once a month. Um, and I see them in little boxes on screens multiple hours a day.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very, not normal situation.
Right.
And it really, I'm incredibly fortunate that it works, but it works because, like I said, because of Michelle. And I think because I already knew that team, so I had a history with them
Okay.
already. And so,
But you're really a pioneer in this because, I mean, growing up, really, I mean, like we're about the same age, I would imagine. And, you know, growing up without having computers and without having all these resources and doing something that far away from one another and making it work. I mean, that's incredible that you're able to do that. And so you must have learned a lot about that communication while you were
yeah, I mean,
working
and
your
it's
way
not,
up.
yeah, and it's not ever perfect, right? And to be very open and transparent and honest, I have two people on the marketing team who worked with me at SmartPack for a long time. So um, I've relationships like they basically are in my brain. Like we know
Yeah.
each other so well that it can work. It can work. Not to say that it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And they're probably going to listen to this podcast and say, lady, we need to talk about some things. But it is okay, and it is okay because that team is incredibly strong, and it is okay because that team is empowered to make decisions for themselves. So if they relied on me to be there to manage their lives in a very intricate and detailed way, it would not work. But we've tried to give them guardrails and guidelines and help them have the tools that they need to be able to be independent and empowered to do their jobs. And they've just been phenomenal. Like I'm gonna knock on wood.
Oh,
I'm saying
yeah.
it's going well.
So, speaking of like riding breeches and things like that, or do you have a different name for them? We called them breeches when I was growing up. Okay.
Yep.
So, speaking of those, how have they changed over the years then? I'm sure that they are
Oh my
completely
gosh.
different from what they. I mean, we went to a show this summer and a couple shows, and I am just surprised at how everything has changed as far as what you can be more colorful than what you were. You can have bows in your hair, you can have sparkles on your belts, you can have all sorts of things. You know, we were just pretty much basic when we were younger. But how have I'm sure the designs have changed and
Everything has changed. Everything. And it depends on what discipline you're riding in. So we primarily focus on the English disciplines, although we do have styles of tights and breeches that for sure can find their way into a Western saddle and be totally fine. But primarily we talk to an English riding customer. And it really depends on their discipline. If they're dressage, if they're eventing, if they're hunter jumper, it can be very different, and different parts of the country are very different in terms of what they wear. Right. So I'm, hunter jumper equitation rider in the Northeast. Everything in my barn is black and gray and navy. Like there's no color anywhere.
okay.
You don't put color anywhere on your body when you are riding. Well, especially if you're showing. When we're schooling, we can get a little more fun. And on the West Coast, if you go to a hunter jumper show there, they may have bling on the collar of their coat, or they may, it just totally depends on the part of the country, and a lot of times it depends on what the trainer will allow and won't allow in the hunter jumper disciplines specifically. But I'd say, overall, the biggest change in riding apparel, regardless of your discipline and regardless of if you want to be conservative or flashy, is that athletic technical fabrics have been incorporated into styles and designs. So when I was growing up showing, we were in wool,
Yeah.
non-stretch hunt coats
Yes.
all year round.
Yes.
How
90
did we
degrees.
survive? God, I put one of those coats on just for fun, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and I was like, and that was my fancy coat that I bought in college, and I thought I was like the
Right.
bomb because I had this really cool, like, and I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So stretch, breathability, wicking, cooling, like all of those functional technical fabrics have now made their way into equestrian sports, which was very long overdue, and has been done in a way that is still respectful of the traditional look of the sport. Um, Obviously, there are some brands that are a little bit more fashion forward. They typically come from Europe. Europe tends to be way more
Yeah.
fashion forward in their styling and what they will ride in. But we do see that in the rings here as well. So yeah, I would just say it's like really the technical fabric, and making things fit and work for an athlete. Because riders are athletes, contrary to popular belief of some people who don't understand riding. Um, so at Kerrits, this was Carrie's sort of mantra from day one, was in saddle performance and in saddle fit and in saddle function. And I think that's one of the things that makes Kerrits a little bit different, because I do believe there are still brands who design for aesthetics first and not in saddle performance, and we design for in saddle performance first, and aesthetic second. Obviously, we want to look good in what we're wearing, but the most important thing is that it functions the way it needs to in the saddle and in the barn.
So tell us a little bit about the other brand that you guys have, which is EQL.
We've also started a lifestyle apparel line. So we now have a brand called EQL, which stands for Equileisure. Equileisure sounds like
Nice.
something your grandfather would wear, so that wasn't cool. So we had to come up with something else. So we call it EQL. And so we've taken all of the things that we've learned in the past 35 years about fit and function in saddle and in barn, and translated that into apparel that is appropriate for women who love horses but need something to wear outside of the barn. So it's lifestyle apparel, with a little wink to equestrian styling. And we're trying to do that in a responsible, I'm not going to say sustainable. Sustainable means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but we're trying to use responsibly sourced fabrics and materials and things in that brand. So I think, when you're thinking about the path forward, that becomes a more important component of everybody's brand story, right? Trying to be more earth friendly and figuring out how to not destroy our planet. So we're trying to do that in both brands for sure.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will be taking a short break, and when we come back, we'll enter our next segment, Canter Banter.
This podcast is brought to you by Ram Horse Fencing and Stalls, the one-stop shop for your horse farm. Ram is family-owned and operated and has been in business for over 30 years. We welcome you to call in and speak with an expert about your next project today at 866-653-8984. Again, that's 866-653-8984. Do you love horses and live the equestrian lifestyle? Be sure to check out our brand new blog at www.yourhorsefarm.com. We publish 3 posts per week and feature a free printable equine checklist every month. Yourhorsefarm.com is a great equine online resource, so be sure to share with all the horse lovers in your life. And remember, laugh much and ride often.
So I fall off a lot. And I don't think I fall off because I'm a terrible rider necessarily, but I kind of tend to have a really hard time keeping my heels down when it matters the most. So I fall off a lot. So I have a lot of very embarrassing falling off stories, but one of my most embarrassing falling off stories is the one that I will share with you. So I had just moved to a new barn, and I had a very spicy chestnut mare named Ellie Rose, and she was a handful, to say the very least. Lovely, lovely mare, but difficult redhead. She had a very big spook in her. And I had kind of figured out how to manage the spook in a way that kept me in the tack. So I was feeling really good about that. Moved her to a new barn, and she started stopping at the jumps. And I am terrible when horses stop at the jumps. Like, that is like my most vulnerable time in life,
Little
because
bit.
my heels are never down at that point. Like, it's just never good. So she started stopping, and I was at this new barn. I'm like, well, maybe it's like, I don't know what's going on. It's embarrassing because I brought this horse and I wanted her to be good. So anyway, we're at one of our very first horse shows with my new barn and this horse. And it was an A-rated show in the Northeast. So, it was like a lot of people were there, and I was trying to be impressive. That was my first mistake, right?
I was going to say,
So we go into our first class, and she stops and spins in front of the jump, and I go flying off. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't go as planned. So we walk out, run my stirrups up, walk out of the ring, get back on, school out in the schooling area. I'm like, okay, we're gonna go back in and do the next class. So we go back into the next class. She stops, spins, and I fall off again. So this time, I don't know what happened. It's like when you have that moment where you're like, I'm in the dirt again, and I don't know what to do. I'm not hurt. So I stood up, ran my stirrups up, and started putting the jump back together. Why? I don't know. But from the end gate, my new trainer, who I'm trying to impress, goes, you don't have to put the jump back up.
Oh,
just
boy.
come out of the ring. And I was like, oh, now I've really done it. So yeah, that was one of my most embarrassing fall off stories.
Well, you were trying, and it's not easy. I was going to say, how many people did you have looking at you when you were trying to get over the jump? Because I think that's the biggest thing. When you have that many people watching you, if you're at a new barn, and when you said like that first, I was trying to impress, and I thought, oh my goodness, isn't that how all of our fall off stories happen? I was trying to impress, and I thought, I have said that same thing before.
Yeah. And then you don't want to prolong the agony. Like, you want to
Right.
get up and get out of
Right.
the ring, right? Why I felt like I needed to take the time to rebuild the jump.
Because
before I
you're
went
helpful and you wanted everybody to be happy.
Yes, that's right. That's
right.
right. I didn't want the jump crew to
Right.
have to work too hard.
Right.
They had just rebuilt the jump for me the class
Right.
before. I
Exactly.
didn't feel like I have to do it again. Yeah, that's my story.
We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast and encourage you to share with all your equestrian family and friends. You can tune into the Late Night Riders podcast show every Friday night. Each episode will be uploaded exclusively on YouTube, where you can subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our latest shows. Do you have a topic you'd like us to discuss? We want to hear from you. You may email us at podcast@ramfence.com, or feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you again for listening.